We talk a lot about tanks. We talk about their performance, their armament, armor, engine, use, and so much more. Some people also talk about the tank's crew's survivability, meaning how high the chances of survival are if the tank gets hit. But after all this, no one seems to care about the actual tank men. No one really talks about how their daily workplace looks and how it feels like. And now, since there's a bloody war going on in Ukraine, there's obviously a lot of tanks there as well. One of them is the Soviet T-72 tank, which is being used by both Russia and Ukraine. The T-72 tank is the daily workplace of a good amount of people now, just like your office might be your daily workplace if you work a normal corporate job. Today, we're gonna take the time to talk about the commander's position in the T-72 main battle tank. That way you can imagine how it feels to be there, and I will try to show as many pictures and videos as possible so that you can actually imagine being there. So hello and welcome to the Bobby and Tanks YouTube channel, and enjoy this video. Now let's start with how the commander is seated. The commander's seat is obviously very robust. It offers some comfort with a large square cushion and a large square backrest attached to the seat frame. It's also adjustable in height. The backrest is foldable so that the commander can access any ammunition stowed behind his seat. The driver could then also enter the turret if the turret is traversed to the rear of the tank. The commander's seat can also be fully removed or folded in a vertical position. Now, the normal position the commander sits in is with his seat raised a little bit and his feet resting on the autoloader carousel cover. He's in the best position to look through the vision devices in his cupola, quite frankly, because he is the commander. If the crew is not in combat and the commander wants to get a bit more cozy, he can lower his seat, which will allow him to stretch his legs. Now, obviously, he wouldn't do that during combat because it's just not a very logical thing to do. But there's more to that. The main reason why is because there is less leg room on the cover of the autoloader carousel than on the gunner's side, and because the ammunition box and case collector for the coaxial machine gun hang far below the turret ring, so there is not much room to maneuver when the gun is elevated. To the left of the commander there is the recoil guard, which is designed to protect the commander from the recoil path of the main gun when firing. It also protects him from accidentally getting injured by the autoloader. The top part of the recoil guard can be folded away so that the commander can access the gun breech better, or to allow the commander to move to the gunner's station and vice versa. If the autoloader needs to be replenished with new ammo, the entire recoil guard can be folded or removed to allow the crew to access it. This will also be done if the autoloader doesn't work anymore for whatever reason, which would mean the main gun would have to be reloaded manually. Now, if the crew gets in such a situation, they would probably want to have as much space as possible, because without a recoil guard, one would want to be as far away from the gun breech as possible. To do that, the commander can just fold up his seat and backrest to free up some space. If you were to measure the width of the commander's station at the position of the commander's torso, it would be about 63.5 centimeters. The height would be 89 to 91 centimeters when measured from the seat cushion to the ceiling of the commander's cupola. It's measured in a way that would allow a 170 centimeter or 5'10" tall man to look through the vision devices. Now, obviously, the seat can be adjusted to fit any height. The commander's hatch opens forward. It's debatable whether this is good or bad. It has a clamshell shape and is mounted on a rotating cupola. Based on T-64A turret drawings and other information, the diameter of the cupola is 70 centimeters. Measurements of the T-72M show that the commander's hatch is 58.4 centimeters wide and 33 centimeters long. Since the cupola has a dome shape, the actual size of the hatch opening is slightly larger than the length alone would suggest, as the cupola exits leaning backwards rather than climbing straight up. Interestingly, in 2010, the T-72 tank crews were issued with 6 B-15 cowboy suits which had a fragmentation vest added. This made entering and exiting through the hatch more difficult, but, well, everything for safety. Now, the commander also has to open the hatch, but that's not very easy to do considering the fact that it weighs 125 kilograms. Now imagine sitting in the commander's position and having to push 125 kilograms of weight upwards. He would rather take the escape hatch. Luckily for the commander, he does not have to do that. The hatch is spring-loaded with a plate torsion spring built into the hinge to assist the commander in opening the hatch. The reason why the hatch is so heavy is obviously because it has very thick armor. Quite frankly, it doesn't help against drones if the hatch is open, but whatever. There is a simple rotating handle to lock the hatch when closed so that it doesn't bounce up and down when driving. There's also a handle to lock the hatch when it's open so that the commander can look at the chaos outside or operate the cupola mounted machine gun. Now, because the hatch opens forward, the commander is full body protected from machine gun fire as well. Not from the sides and rear though. To get into this position in the first place, the commander will just set his seat to the tallest setting and stand on his seat to pop out. Depending on the seat and the height of the commander, only his eyes would peek over the hatch, and sometimes the commander would even stand on the recoil guard and the height adjustment mechanism of his seat to gain a taller vantage point without completely exiting the tank. This would often be done when signaling with flags. During long marches, the commander may choose to sit on the rim of his hatch. This position still provides front body protection from the hatch. The ability to sit outside the tank is important because otherwise the commander would have to stand on his seat for hours without moving. Standing like this for an entire day of maneuvers can cause extreme fatigue and swollen feet. Now, the typical question in the military is, who gives a shit? But well, some physical and emotional well-being is still important. Starting in the mid-70s, the commander's cupola could be equipped with a dust shield in front of the hatch. This shield was installed before long convoy marches and removed before combat. The lower part is a hanging fabric sheet that covers the commander's hatch when it's open. The upper part is a face shield for the commander when he sits outside on the turret. This shield protects him from dust and bugs flying into his face and everything else in the air while traveling in a single column march formation. Unlike the commander's hatch, the shield is not bulletproof, splinter-proof or fragmentation-proof. Therefore, it does not change the level of protection for the commander. Like the other two crew stations, the commander has a single adjustable DV3 fan. It's really just a simple fan powered by the tank's electrical system. Even though it's basic, this fan is important to keep the crew somewhat comfortable and functional in the summer heat. In contrast, foreign tanks like the Leopard 1, M60A1 and Chieftain, as well as their successors, had ducted ventilation systems with air outlets at each crew station in the turret. The commander has his own hatch and can ride on the turret roof if he feels uncomfortable inside the tank. For better ventilation in the crew compartment, the air intake for the engine can be switched from the external intake to the crew compartment intake. The crew compartment intake draws air from the crew compartment, which greatly increases the airflow inside the tank if the hatches are open. Normally, the crew compartment air intake is used to provide an alternate air supply for the engine during deep water fording and snorkeling maneuvers over 1.8 meters deep. When crossing streams, the turret roof hatches should be left open if possible. However, if combat is imminent, the hatches have to be closed and only the snorkel tube port in the gunner's hatch is opened. In both situations, a large volume of air flows into the fighting compartment, which undoubtedly is very welcomed by the crew in hot weather. Now, let's look at the important stuff the commander needs to see what's going on outside. Quite frankly, he can't just open his hatch to peek out all the time. The commander primarily looks outside by using a forward-facing TKN-3M binocular periscope. There are two rectangular TNPO-160 periscopes on either side to support the TKN-3M. And then there are two TNPA-65A periscopes in his hatch. The TKN-3 periscope is fixed directly forward, aligned with the central line of the cupola. Since the TKN-3 doesn't provide a wide, unmagnified view, the commander has to turn the cupola and use his other periscopes for a broader field of vision. The two TNPO-160 periscopes are positioned at the 45-degree angles from the cupola's central line. With these two periscopes, the commander has a 176-degree frontal view with a 22-degree blind spot directly in front filled by the TKN-3. The rotating cupola allows the commander to use all 5 periscopes for a complete 360-degree view when the hatch is closed. But there is no periscope for a direct rear view, which means the commander has to rotate the cupola to see behind. The anti-aircraft gun stowed directly behind the cupola in the travel position can obstruct this rear view. The gunner's hatch on the left side of the turret is slanted, allowing an unhindered view to the left. Even the gunner's night vision sight doesn't fully block the commander's view because its height does not exceed the maximum height of the turret roof. However, the commander's view to the left of the turret in the 10 o'clock sector became obstructed when Contact 1 reactive armor blocks were installed on the turret roof starting with the T-72 AV modification in 1985. This issue continued with the installation of Contact 5 blocks in the T-72B 1989 model and remains a problem with the T-90A. In these later models, the responsibility for monitoring these sectors shifts to the gunner. The photos show the cupola of a T-72B3 and the view from the left-facing TMPO-160 in the cupola, illustrating how the Contact 5 blocks on the turret roof obstruct the view. The commander has 4 periscopes in addition to the TKN-3 for general vision. Using periscopes instead of vision blocks and the thick turret armor around the base of the cupola, the commander is fully protected from concentrated machine gun fire directed at the periscopes. There is no risk of an eye injury from broken glass because the periscopes are made of solid glass prisms and the eyepiece is shielded by an additional layer of ballistic glass. The likelihood of periscopes being hit by enemy fire depends greatly on the distance between the tank and enemy combatants. Aimed machine gun fire is unlikely to damage a periscope from a distance, but as the tank gets closer to an enemy position, hitting the periscopes becomes easier. During World War II, infantry were trained to target tank observation devices as a last resort. Many of these devices were just slits or slits with glass inserts which did not provide any ballistic protection. One of the main reasons for using periscopes was to improve crew safety. However, this did not stop enemy infantry from targeting observation devices, as destroying them hinders the crew from doing just about anything with the tank. This tactic has proven effective time and time again, most recently in the Syrian Civil War, where much of the fighting happened in densely populated urban areas. This video shows a Syrian T-72 with 2 of its periscopes destroyed. The commander's cupola on the T-64 was pretty bad because it had a 144-degree field of view without head movement. This design was carried over to the T-64A. No one knows why the visibility was so limited, especially since an effective periscope layout had been established with the T-54 model 1949. In this regard, the T-72 was a lot better. Compared to a typical Western tank cupola, the T-72 has fewer fixed periscopes, but the number of periscopes doesn't always indicate how good or usable they actually are. For example, the German Leopard 1 has 8 periscopes around its circular cupola, but only 5 face the forward 180-degree sector. 2 of them are partly obstructed by the loader's cupola, machine gun mount, and hatch mechanism on the left side of the turret. On top of that, the Leopard 1's cupola does not rotate, and its forward-facing periscope has a high periscopic length, which means the field of view is more narrow. Therefore, the T-72's commander's cupola has pretty much the same forward visibility despite having fewer periscopes. The main drawback for the T-72 commander is when directing the driver to reverse the tank, because he has to rotate his cupola to see behind the turret or have the turret aimed to the rear. But even though the T-72's rearward visibility is objectively poorer compared to Western tanks, this does not mean the combat performance is worse. The effectiveness of visibility devices depend on how they are used. Often, when a tank needs to reverse, it is in a non-combat situation where the commander can safely be outside the hatch. Now, if the tank needs to reverse during combat, it's most likely to change positions or to move into turret defilade after firing. In these cases, the driver would have initially approached the firing position from behind, so he most likely already knows the area behind him is clear to reverse. If the commander does need to assist the driver when reversing, he can rotate the cupola and use a periscope or open the hatch and look out. So even though the T-72's rearward visibility is limited, it does not significantly impact its combat effectiveness. To actually understand the value of fixed periscopes, it's important to understand their fundamental purpose. In combat, these periscopes are used pretty much only when the enemy is very close to the tank, something within 500 meters. Otherwise, their primary function is to help the commander view the surrounding environment and gain some special awareness by identifying landmarks. When the tank is moving quickly across rough terrain, it's not effective to use fixed and unmagnified periscopes. That is because the tank obviously bounces up, down, left and right and generally shakes a lot. The commander would only see a rapid flicker between the ground and the sky, making it impossible to reliably spot or identify camouflaged enemy forces. For a modern tank designed and used during the mid to late Cold War era, it is practical to see and identify targets using a magnified optic. Stabilization is essential for effective use in a moving tank because the narrow field of view of a magnified optic can worsen the effects of the tank's movement. The T-72 Commander's TKN-3 periscope fulfills this purpose as it offers a high magnification and a good field of view. It also has handles to help the commander hold it steady. Looking at how the commander's viewing devices have actually been used, tests were done in 1974. Turns out that generally 30% of battlefield observations were made using the forward-facing unmagnified periscope. At most, 5% were made using the magnified 8x optic with a stabilized field of view. However, during tactical situations like breakthrough missions, the use of the magnified optic to search for targets increased to 50%. Overall, more than 70% of observations were made using just 3 periscopes at the front of the cupola, covering a 100-degree frontal sector, and over 95% of observations were within a 200-degree frontal sector. Interestingly, the highest recorded use of the rear view periscope was only 0.8%. Based on these results, it is clear that in a fixed cupola with all-around visibility, 5 unmagnified periscopes covering the front 180-degree sector meets 95.3% of the commander's visibility needs in various combat conditions. The rear-facing periscopes are rarely used. A rotating cupola provides a 206-degree arc of vision, meets 98.1% of the commander's visibility needs in the same conditions. This means that the T-72 cupola design is very practical. Even the T-64 cupola with just 1 TKN-3 and 2 TNPO-160 periscopes can theoretically meet 70% of the commander's visibility needs. In addition to observation devices, the commander's station in the T-72 is equipped with various tools and equipment organized logically for him to complete his tasks. In this photo, we see the R123 radio transceiver marked in blue at the bottom. Above, there is a silver-gray switch box marked in red for switching between radio and intercom communication. Next to it is a white master control panel marked in green, which controls most of the tank's functions, including managing the lights and ventilator. Behind the silver and white metal flaps at the corner of the panel are the emergency engine stop button and the button for engaging the emergency fire extinguishing system, which activates all the fire extinguishers in the fighting compartment. Additionally, the commander is responsible for setting the fuse on high explosive frag shells. To do that, he uses the control panel to interrupt the autoloader's operation. He flips the RAM switch to the off position, which stops the loading cycle. When the commander selects the high explosive frag option and the gunner presses the load button, the autoloader operates normally until it raises the shell to the ramming position behind the gun breech. At this point, the mechanism stops because the power rammer is turned off. The commander then sets the fuse and switches the ram switch back to the on option, allowing the loading cycle to proceed normally. The silver box to the right of the intercom switch enables the commander to control the autoloader to unload it and control the autoloader functions when loading the gun semi-automatically or manually. The box opens to reveal control toggles for operating different parts of the autoloader system, such as raising and lowering the shell casting catcher, opening and closing the ejection port, and activating or deactivating the power rammer. If the autoloader is only partially malfunctioning, the commander can use this control box to operate some parts of the loading procedure automatically and other parts manually. If the autoloader carousel malfunctions, it can be rotated manually, and the autoloader elevator can be cranked by hand to extract ammunition. This electric chain rammer can then be used to ram the ammunition into the breech. Anyways, that was all I had to say for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I said anything that is not right, or you think I should have added any additional information to this video, please let me know in the comments and share your knowledge. Besides that, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.